Let us commence this module by differentiating between strategy and policy. At the outset, it is important to differentiate between strategy and policy to understand how they are related. This is to facilitate a complete framework and comprehensive concept of policy. To begin with, a strategy has four aspects. First, the philosophic level at which objectives as well as the weights to different objectives are determined. Second, the level at which the choices are spelt and elements of the strategy are worked out. Third, the policy level where instruments of control and incentives are conceived. Fourth, the implementation level where the policy instruments are practiced for achievements of the objectives. In the light of the above understanding, one may define industrial policy as an instrument of control and incentives to produce. The incentive to produce is for the desired level of industrial development and growth along the lines of strategy formulated for the overall economy. In chronological order, India launched the industrial policy in 1948, 1956, 1977, 1980 and 1991. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the idea of industrial policy. Learn about the objectives of different industrial policies in India since independence. Identify the component of different industrial policies in India. Understand that the popular characterization of new policy as LPG is not satisfactory. Moving on to discuss the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948. The maiden industrial policy statement was made by the Government of India on April 6, 1948. Mixed economy. This policy sought to experiment with the idea of mixed economy, in which there is the existence of both public sector and private sector industries, and the industries were also allowed to operate to the public, private and both sectors as under. First was the public sector, where the industries owned by the state comes under this category. Second is the private sector. Private entrepreneurs are producing in such industries. Third is joint sector. Both the private and the public ownership is supposed to produce in such industries. The industries were divided into four categories. First, exclusive control of central government. The manufacturing of arms and ammunitions, atomic energy and railways were directed to be under the exclusive control of government at the center. Mixed sector. The second category included shipbuilding, iron and steel, coal, aircraft manufacturing, mineral, oils, manufacturing of telephones as well as telegraphs, and wireless apparatus excluding railway receiving sets. Third, under the control of government. The third category contained industries of such basic importance that the central government needed to regulate them in the larger interest of the economy. It included the basic industries like machine tools, automobiles, salt, prime movers, tractors, heavy machinery, electronics, engineering, fertilizers, heavy chemicals, electrochemical industries, non-ferrous metals, minerals and industries related to defense, cotton and woolen textiles, power and industrial alcohol, sugar, cement, air and sea transport, paper, rubber and newsprint. Open for private and cooperatives. A fourth category consisting the rest of the industrial field was left open to the private enterprises, individuals and cooperatives. Infancy of Indian industries dictated a restrictive attitude towards the foreign capital. As a rule, the major interest in the ownership and effective control was meant to be in the Indian hands. Training of suitable Indian personnel was insisted for the purpose of eventually replacing the foreign experts will be insisted upon. Let us now understand the Industrial Act of 1951. Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951. In order to control and regulate industrial development in the country, an act was passed by the Parliament in October 1951. The act was operational on May 8, 1952. The main objectives of the act were as follows: the regulation of industrial investment and production in accordance with the planned priorities and targets. Next, insulating the small entrepreneurs against competition from large industries. Next, prevention of monopoly and concentration of ownership of industries. Next, balanced regional development in order to reduce disparities in development levels of the different regions of the economy. After understanding the IPR of 1948, let us now move on to study the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. Industrial Policy Resolution 1956 was conditioned by the Mahalanobis's model of growth, which suggested that emphasis on heavy industries would lead the economy toward a long-term higher growth path. New classification of industries. For the higher growth of the economy, a new classification of industries was required. So, all the industries were reclassified under the three schedules, which are as follows. First, Schedule A, industries with exclusive responsibility of state. It had 17 industries in total. Atomic energy, arms and ammunition, iron and steel, heavy casting and forging of iron and steel, heavy machinery required for iron and steel production, for mining, for machine tools, manufacturing, etc. Mineral oils, coal, mining of iron ore and other important minerals like copper, lead, zinc, and aircraft, railways, air transport, shipbuilding, heavy electrical industries, telephone, telegraph and wireless equipment, generation and distribution of electricity. Next is Schedule B, industries to be progressively owned by state, in which the state would generally establish new enterprises, while the private enterprises would be expected only to supplement the effort of state. It contained 12 industries in all. Such industries include other mining industries, aluminium and other non-ferrous metals were excluded from Schedule A, machine tools, ferroalloys and tool steel, the chemical industry, antibiotics and other essential drugs, fertilizers, synthetic rubber, carbonization of coal, chemicals, pulp road transport and sea transport. Next is Schedule C. All the other industries and their future development were left to the market, that is, initiate and enterprise of the private sector. Objectives. Major objectives of the policy were as follows. First, to accelerate the economic growth and the process of industrialization as a prelude to achieve a socialistic pattern of society. Next, eradication of regional disparities through the development of regions with low industrial base. Next, enhancement of living standards and working condition of the common man. Next, reduction in the disparities in income and wealth. Next, to prevent the emergence and growth of private monopolies and concentration of economic power in different subsectors of industry. Next, to promote mutual dependence of public and private sectors. Next, assisting and controlling of private sector in line with the national priorities. Next, encouragement of small scale and cottage industries. Next, development of technical and managerial personnel. Next, to promote the industrial peace and harmony. Next, to maintain a restrictive attitude towards foreign capital. Industrial Policy 1977. In December 1977, a new industrial policy was announced in order to do away with the so-called shortcomings of the Industrial Policy Statement of 1956. Major shortcomings were identified as follows: increased unemployment, increased urban and rural disparities, stagnation of investment, widespread industrial sickness. So, the major fields of concern in this policy were as follows: promotion of small scale sector, areas for large scale sector, expanding the role of public sector, promotion of technological self-reliance, approach toward foreign collaborations, approach towards sick unit, etc. The Industrial Policy 1980. Industrial Policy 1980 was initiated with the start of liberalization in India. It marks a break from earlier industrial policies because of the change in the mindsets of the policy makers toward foreign capital. The major objectives of this policy are as follows: correction of regional imbalances, maximizing production and achieving higher productivity, greater employment generation, strengthening of agro-based industries, boosting of export-oriented industries, promotion of economic federalism through equitable spread of investment and dispersal of returns, ensuring consumer protection against high prices and indifferent quality. The new industrial policy of 1991. Earlier, industrial growth was sought to be achieved through the state intervention because of the distrust of indigenous and foreign capital. However, the economic philosophy of the government underwent a major change and the restrictive regime of industrial growth was set to be replaced with deregulation, privatization and globalization. In line with the liberalization, measures were announced during 1980s. The government announced a new industrial policy on July 24, 1991. The objectives of these policies were as follows: to achieve the pace of growth and for certain corrections was the main objective of the policy, to build on the gains already made, to correct the weaknesses, to maintain a sustained growth in productivity and gainful employment, and to attain the international competitiveness. The pursuit of all these objectives will be conditioned by the need to preserve the environment and ensure the most optimal use of available resources. All sectors of industry, whether small, medium or large, belonging to the public, private or cooperative sector will be encouraged to grow and improve on their past performance. Major initiatives. In pursuit of the above objectives, government decided to take a series of initiatives in respect to the policies related to the following areas: industrial licensing, foreign investment, foreign technology agreements, rationalization of public sector. Decisions of the government. In view of the considerations outlined above, the government decided to take a series of measures to unshackle the Indian industrial economy from the cobwebs of unnecessary bureaucratic control. These measures complement the other series of measures being taken by the government in the areas of trade policy, exchange rate, management, fiscal policy, financial sector reform and overall macroeconomic management. Industrial licensing policy. Industrial licensing was eliminated except a few industries. The reason are multifold, extending from social factors to environmental hazards. The status quo for industries meant for the small scale sector did not change. Same was true for the areas where paramount security and strategic concerns. Automatic clearance was given in projects needing imported capital goods. In cases where foreign exchange availability is insured through foreign equity, or if the CIF value of the required import of capital goods is lower than 25% of the total value net of taxes of plant and equipment, the foreign exchange up to a maximum value of rupees 2 crore was available. In view of then difficult foreign exchange scenarios, it was stated that this scheme would come into force from April 1992. In other cases, imports of capital goods would need to obtain clearance from the Secretariat for Industrial Approvals in the Department of Industrial Development in accordance with the availability of foreign exchange resources. In locations other than cities of more than 1 million populations, requirement obtaining industrial approvals from the central government was waived, except for the industries subject to compulsory licensing. For cities with population more than 1 million, industries apart from those of a non-polluting nature such as computer software and printing, electronics will be located outside 25 kilometers of the peripheral area, excepting the prior designated industrial areas. A flexible location policy would need to be adopted in respect of such cities which require industrial regeneration. Foreign investment. Approval is provided for direct foreign investment up to 51% foreign equity in industries with high priority. No bottlenecks of any kind would be there in this process. However, such clearance is available only when the foreign equity is adequate to cover the foreign exchange requirements for imported capital goods. It was also added that consequential amendments to the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act of 1973 would be carried out, while the import of the components, raw materials and intermediate goods and payment of know-how fees and royalties will be dictated by the general policy applicable to the other domestic units. However, dividends payments would be monitored through the Reserve Bank of India in order to ensure that outflows due to dividend payments are recovered by the export earnings over a period of time. Foreign Technology Agreement. Automatic permission is provided to the foreign technology agreements in the industries with high priority to a lump sum payment of rupees 1 crore, 5% royalty for the domestic sales and 8% for the exports. This remains subject to aggregate payment of 8% sales over a 10-year period from date of agreement or 7 years from the date of commencement of production. Automatic permission is provided subject to the same guidelines as above, if no free foreign exchange is needed for any payments. Public sector. It was decided to critically review the portfolio of public sector investments with a view to focus on the public sectors on strategic, high-tech and essential infrastructure. While an element of reservation for the public sector is being retained, there would be no restriction for the areas for exclusivity to be selectively opened up to the private sector. On the other hand, the public sector will also be allowed to entry in areas not reserved for it. Chronically, the sick public sector enterprises unlikely to be turned around for the formulation of revival or rehabilitation schemes would be referred to the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction or other similar high-level institutions created for this purpose. A social security mechanism would also be created for the protection of interest of workers likely to be affected by such rehabilitation packages. The MRTP Act would be amended to eliminate the threshold of limits of assets with regard to MRTP companies and dominant undertakings. This in turn eliminates the requirement of prior approval of central government for the establishment of new undertakings, expansion of undertakings, merger, amalgamations and takeovers, and appointment of directors under certain circumstances. Emphasis was placed on controlling and regulating the monopolistic, restrictive and unfair trade practices. Simultaneously, the newly empowered MRTP Commission will be empowered to begin investigations on the companies received from individual consumers or classes of consumers with regard to monopolistic, restrictive and unfair trade practices. Requisite and comprehensive amendments will be made in the MRTP Act in this respect and for enabling the MRTP Commission to exercise punitive and compensatory powers. Environmental clearance. Statutory clearance concerning to pollution control and environment needed to be acquired by entrepreneurs for setting up an industrial project. A notification SO 60E dated 27 January 1994 issued under the Environment Protection Act of 1986 has mentioned 29 projects in respect of which environmental clearance is required, and it is to be obtained from the Ministry of Environment, Government of India. This list comprises industries like paper, petroleum refineries, thermal power plants, fertilizers, bulk trucks, dyes, petrochemical complexes, cements, etc. Such clearance is not necessary if the volume of investment is lower than 500 million rupees. Such an advantage is not applicable to a number of industries. They include foundries and electroplating industries, dyes, distilleries, terraced roads in Himalayan areas, tourism projects of certain parameters, mining projects, integrated paint complexes, asbestos and asbestos products, bulk trucks and pharmaceuticals and pesticides. Conclusion. It was the public sector which was given the responsibility of making heavy investment for the development of the industrial sector. Private sector was supposed to invest only in the industries where higher returns were expected. To protect the private sector, there was reservation of small scale industries. A number of controls were introduced to regulate the investment in the private sector, and this policy of protectionism remained for a very long time in India. Such a policy resulted to slow industrial growth creation and perpetuation of monopolistic tendencies, inefficiency, corruption, and poor export performances. Such dismal performance forced the ruling elite to change their economic philosophy, leading to outline of new industrial strategy involving a new industrial policy. The new economic policy of 1991 has changed the role of state at vast. Now the state is no more a major producer or investors, rather it is more liberal toward the private sectors as well as the foreign sector. The popular characterization of the new liberal regimes in terms of liberalization, privatization and globalization has been questioned as misleading by Balakrishnan in his study of 2010. He argued that relationship of India's political class to the Indian public sector is independent of the political ideology. The reason lying in reluctance to shed the significant power. If privatization featured prominently in the policy announcements in the early 1990s, then it was dropped as soon as the crisis of 1991 had passed and the economy had stabilized. Now, let us summarize what we have studied in this module. Industrial policy may be defined as the instrument of control and incentives to produce the desired level of industrial development and growth along the lines of strategy formulated for the overall economy. The first industrial policy was announced in 1948 and have been revised from time to time. The first two industrial policies relating to 1948 and 1956 did not produce the right results. They were based on the philosophy of the control of market for state for achievement of the desired goals. As a result, the significant change was first visible in the industrial policy from 1980 onwards. It had a greater tilt towards the market. A major shift occurred in the industrial policy in 1991. It involved a greater play of the market forces. A popular characterization of current industrial regime in terms of LPG does not appear to be satisfactory.